One of the things that I've learned is that the powers that be that are toxifying us are very difficult to overcome, but what we can do is take personal responsibility. So books like the one you just put out are really important for us to wake up. So I just want to start off by saying that we got to wake up, and it has to be on an individual level. And I'm sure you agree. Dr. Mindy here.
Your body is in a war zone.
Different parts of the brain get activated depending upon how stressed you are.
When you look at it from that inflammatory.
It's interesting. I mean, that has some merit to it for sure.
And you can't control everything.
I'd say.
And what about a woman who is not pregnant, but she's aiming?
So the first thing I want to do is welcome you to my podcast. I'm really excited for the conversation. So thank you for being here, Darin. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, grateful to be here, Mindy, and I'm grateful for all the work you're doing as well.
Yeah, and I think you said it right. We're like both in the trenches fighting the fight. And one of the things that I've learned is that the powers that be that are toxifying us are very difficult to overcome, but what we can do is take personal responsibility. So books like the one you just put out are really important for us to wake up. So I just want to start off by saying that we got to wake up, and it has to be on an individual level. And I'm sure you agree.
1,000,000%. And that's where the optimism comes in, right? And it's like, that's where the bite-sized changes of what an individual can do and become aware of, and you do it so well too on your website and breaking things down so that people can choose. And that's what it is. And we always have numbers on our side. We unfortunately, it's literally the world of opposites. It's Twilight Zone episodes that we're literally inside of. And the fact that we even have to have a conversation about this, the fact that that I wrote a book about it, that you have to dedicate a lot of your time, it just tells us that this is a ridiculous scenario. When we've looked at it long enough, like you and I still scratch my head. I'm like, you're reading this stuff, you're reading the research, and yet knowingly these agencies are still allowing this stuff out. And you're like, this makes no sense.
No.
Other than the only conclusion I can make is the profit and power is so much greater than the health and safety of us. And so we do have to, and it's that slippery slope, I'm sure you find too, that people can easily get into the overwhelm conversation because it's proliferated in so many aspects of our life, in every aspect of our life. So well
said. It baffles me as well. And every time I go on any kind of interview and I'm asked about toxins, I literally take a deep breath in and I'm like, okay, are you ready? This is going to get really depressing really quick. And it's so hard. There's I can't give you a positive of this other than we need to wake up and we need a loud voice. Yeah. So one of the things I love about your new book, and I think it's a beautiful way to start this conversation, here's the rub, is it is these modern conveniences. It's the things we love. It's the things that are making our life easier that are potentially killing us. And we've got to be aware of that. So can we start with give us some of the big things we need to know about how these modern conveniences, what they are, and is there an alternative? Does that mean life has to become inconvenient, or is what we need to know about these modern conveniences?
Yeah, and that's it. It's and with these conveniences that just are kind of adopted every day, all day, and we're all born into it.
Yeah.
I didn't choose it, but it's all of a sudden a phone is in my face and now everyone has them. And let's just talk about how amazing the conveniences are.
Yeah.
Right? To walk around with a phone. I remember superfood hunting in the middle. I was lost and I'm like, holy shit, where do I go? There's a trail and it's supposed to be a road. And I remember one of the first times I used the phone's GPS and it found me in the middle of the freaking Andes in South America. And so that's amazing. right? It's an amazing accomplishment what we've done, and to be able to provide really way more food than we actually even need because we're wasting 30 to 50% of the food that we're creating. And of course, we can talk about what kind of food that is, which is also the rub of food itself is now remanufactured and then sold back to us. So these conveniences are crazy. Like, it's like, let's talk about tap water.
Yeah.
For God's sakes, I can go to my sink and turn on-demand water.
Amazing.
When you have 2 billion people in the world that absolutely don't even know essentially what clean water even looks like, right? With a jerry can and going to a bacteria and virus infected water source and playing Russian roulette with drinking water. So let's go, holy shit, we've done a lot of things. And a car, the leading cause of children dying is in a car, right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yet we carry on.
Yeah.
And we use these things. And so the amazing aspect of this is I don't want to be inconvenienced because I'm so used to. But we are not asking questions because the man or woman making the choices who are wielding the wand of these are safe in our world simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And the tricky thing with science these days is it's also cherry picked. So there'll be a whole bunch of good stuff that is shown, and let's invoke the Toxic Substance Control Act. Wait a minute. Why would you need to invoke something that you should have been already governing, right? So it's like, what are you talking about? So then the publicized versions of that are out there, but yet for every good thing they see or show or talk about, there's 100 others that they're not regulating. And so we come into this world where we're like, okay, studies showing we're already being infected with toxic chemicals in the umbilical cord of children. That when you and I grew up, that border, right? That placental border of the woman to the child, that was uncrossable. Right?
Yeah. Oh,
that
so
was
well.
Like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Do what you want. Hell, my mom, she didn't drink that much. My dad was the alcoholic, but my mom was smoking.
Oh yeah. So was my grandma. My grandma smoked when she had my mom, and yeah.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. So they didn't know. And then you also come to find out that one thing that scared me, because I didn't know going into the book, and I had about 15 to 20 researchers. And one of the things that scared me, which I didn't know, I knew the gyloma with proximity and duration of EMFs and cell phones close to the body and close to the head. That was problematic. Hell, a buddy of mine, a researcher 20 years ago, was telling me about that. And what really was scary to me was the blood-brain barrier was showing to be opened with proximity and duration of these polarized EMF exposures. And I was like, what?
Yeah, that's
the brain.
That's been around for a while, by the way. Like you said, it's just nobody wants to know that because the phone is quite convenient. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's this carcinogenic stick we're running around with. But again, there are ways to live in this world, right? There are ways, like I just told you, like I'm in the woods. And so just to get a hardwired wire from AT&T took me 3 months when I first moved here in 2016. And it's been spotty ever since. And I finally, and this was a moral dilemma. My moral dilemma was I don't like at all the fact that Starlink and Elon Musk and all these other people are putting tens of thousands, nearly 40 to 50,000 satellites and microsatellites in our ionosphere and then blasting us with 5G. I'm massively against all of that. I think we should bury the wires. I think we should go back to, So in order for me to live and to be on my purpose, I couldn't function living here and then being a business owner. And so I had to buy a Starlink, and then I hardwired it inside my house so that I don't have extra EMF. So it was a moral dilemma. My point to that is I made a choice, but I also made a choice that is minimizing personal exposure, right? Hardwiring things back in. You and I are both plugged in as we're listening here. We're Bluetooth and all that stuff. So there's a lot of ways, and largely if people look at my life, you don't see a difference, but I'm not having a phone in my pocket on, right? It's on airplane mode. So the conveniences are there. We can still exercise them, but my God, we have a lot of choices that if you don't make them, especially when you're talking about those micro exposures that you know so well, the endocrine disruptors, the lotions, the phthalates, the parabens, the PFAS, which we're getting inoculated every day, all day, and reapplying all of these things. That's where, hey, we're not saying live out under your oak tree and don't use deodorant.
And drop out of society. I want to point out two really interesting things, because you really bring some key pieces to this conversation that I do not want people to miss. For starters, the conversation needs to be had. And in this world where we're like, I like you, I don't like you. You're one of me, you're not one of me. We have lost the art to critically think. And I'm getting really exhausted with it, because people don't know how to think anymore. They see a 90-second reel and they're like, you're out. I don't like you. But when we have such an important conversation, like what is going on with these micro toxins and how are they little by little destroying us, that conversation needs to be open. Second thing, science. All you got to do is go and look at who funds the science, who's on the science study. Like, science has to be considered something where we are getting into the ballpark and we're understanding it, but it's not the end all be all. And we have gotten the cancel culture of, I don't want to talk to you because you don't agree with me. And if it's not scientific, then it's not real. That has destroyed our ability to have a conversation like you and I are having. So I need to point that out, because I've hit enough. Yeah. I've hit my limit with that attitude. And I know you have shared the same belief with me. So.
Yeah. I mean, just from a common sense standpoint, like we have gotten so used to conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean you can still have these toxic compounds and then just with your lobbying dollars get this pushed in and loopholes of fragrances and flavoring agents and flow agents, and like you don't have to disclose any of it, because a lot of things, what is the first thing people say? Well, look on the back of a package and make sure you know what's in the product. No.
How do you understand that? You got to go Google it.
You don't. Not only do you not understand it, there's loopholes that they're not even telling you is in there. Do you look on the back of a can and it says, does it have BPA or BPH in it? No. I mean, now they're starting to push back, and BPA is BPA free, but they also create 3-4 other different versions of that and then use that, and it's maybe BPA free, but it's not BPH free.
And they
So it's like
change it.
It's a whack-a-mole. It's a game of whack-a-mole. Yeah. And the customer, it's impossible for a customer to know that. So it takes this level of, I didn't want to do this.
Right.
But I was compelled to do it. I was compelled to do it and spend 2.5 years of my life. And the last year, every weekend, every day, like it was almost impossible to conclude and even finalize a book because it's so gnarly.
It's very big.
When you peel and you keep peeling, I mean, the history of electrification will blow your mind and tweak your brain and go, wait a minute. Yeah. They already knew the frequencies and electromagnetic fields just coming off of wires and UHF radio towers. They already knew that mammalians were being affected and migration patterns. And it's like, that's not even that's not even remotely getting into 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. So it's blasted on us as a population, and then with no accountabilities and no real safety. And if you really look at like what real scientists and real people with their common sense heads still squared on, all they're asking is questions.
Yeah, just question
anyone.
Yeah, like and can we have the conversation about it? Can you? So just again, this is the part. Like, if you're listening and you're like, "Wow, this is getting really depressing." It is depressing, but can we? What can we do? Give us some practical. What I love about your book is the idea that there are little small steps. You can, if there are small steps of these toxins that are making us sick, what are the small steps we can take to make ourselves well in this toxic world?
Yeah, I mean, everything is rooted in a habit. So you're in habit, right? So a lot of these things, you're buying the same laundry detergent. So you have to actually go, oh, I never questioned whether that was healthy or not. When in fact, maybe with my children, I can make a great DIY. Or if you're really lazy, you can just put organic vinegar in with some lavender. Well, hell, I just did that the other day because my dog's beds were just crazy, and I just washed them in vinegar, and it doesn't smell. It doesn't. So there's a lot of. It's just a matter of these products need questions, right? But there's a lot of DIYs, and luckily, because of from EMF fields, electrosensitivity, and more people, because we're just getting blasted with this, more people with multiple chemical sensitivities. There's more people. This is becoming, and then food sensitivities, food allergies, it's screaming at us. So like, for example, like I said, like the cell phone itself, I never, ever put that thing up to my head.
Right. Yeah.
Ever,
me neither.
Right. So if I'm around and I am home, I can receive a call and it's on speaker mode. And if I'm somewhere else or listening to something on a plane, I'm plugged in, right? And even the next version is the air tubes, right? So there's no EMFs even traveling through the wire at that point getting to my head. So again, people, if they have a takeaway with electromagnetics or cell phones, in particular smart devices, which is not smart at all, I would take that and just say that's the opposite. It's a very dumb device. It's going to blast you with electrical pollution and stress. But when you think about that proximity, how close a device is to you and how long it is close to you, that's where it really the wheels start coming off when it comes to the stress responses, when it comes to the glioma and the tumors and the things. But this is not just showing up. This is not acute. This is every day, all day. So as it relates to the cell phone, still have it, but just, and if you even want to use a stylus, if you're on the desk, you can have a stylus. Like I have a stylus right here. So I put my cell phone on a stand, and then I'm just using my cell phone with my stylus, and I'm not touching it. So there's all kinds of little things that you can do. Again, turn your phone off or put it on airplane mode when it's on your body. If you
that's
think
what I
you're
was
going to
wondering.
receive a call, just then just keep hold it. And now it's starting to come out, which is, it was always in the owner's manual of a phone that you're not supposed to keep it.
It's
within, I think, 9 centimeters of your body.
It's in the owner's manual, like 4 inches from your from the Apple phone. Well, not to call out one product, I'm sure they all say the same thing, but it says that there. So, so everybody's motivated, because I think EMFs is a very interesting one. And I just want to come back to this idea that what we know about EMFs right now is that it does create destruction to the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is exactly that. It blocks stuff from getting into your brain. And there's a new concept called leaky brain, where that brain barrier gets its integrity is lost. And now toxins can get in, inflammation starts. Is there anything else we need to know about EMFs, phones, and what it does to our brains?
Yeah. So, I mean, those are big indicators because I really saw that one study was like allowing the proteins and albumin to go right into the brain. And then it's just like this cascade of inflammatory responses. And again, it's like if you're doing this, and people would say, oh, well, I'm using my phone right now. I don't feel anything.
Right.
And just like, okay, well, eat an apple. Do you feel you have energy to run a marathon after eating an apple? No, we live in this more than anyone. We live in a homeopathic world, essentially, right? A little bit of sun, some good rest, get some water. But also on the other side, if you keep getting exposed to the phthalates and the endocrine disruptors and the PFAS, over time, this starts to create the disharmony over that period of time. So the micro doses is really what we're talking about.
That was good because I think EMFs is a scary big topic. Yeah. And I like that it's about changing your habit with it. We're not saying like shut your phone off I love that you're out in the woods and you've got Starlink, you've had to Wi-Fi, and I think that's all great. But to make this applicable for people, put it on airplane mode when it goes in your pocket.
So the EMFs thing, like at minimum, just unplug, turn off your Wi-Fi router at night. You don't need it on. And just to kind of create a context for people maybe hearing this for the first time, or it's hard for them to grasp. Yes, this is an invisible electromagnetic world. You can't see it. It's even worse than the the tobacco industry, right? And they kicked that can down the road and lied for 40 years. So imagine the telecommunication company is ranking up there as doing very similar things. They know that this is harmful with proximity and duration. So you talk about, just quickly, ionizing radiation, we know it rips the DNA apart. It's X-rays, it's on that spectrum. But it's easy to say, well, this is non-ionizing. And so where the science is starting to show is, yes, it's not acutely ripping your DNA apart, but again, over time, it's causing, and everyone can understand this, it's causing stress in the body. How is it doing that? On a cellular level, it's increasing free radical oxygen species, right? It's creating free radicals. So your body it's under attack. It's like the crazy thing, Dr. Mindy, it was like for me when I was reading the EMF stuff, and then I go back to the chemical exposures from our personal care, I'm like, oh my God, it's like the same thing. Yeah. It's almost as if these EMFs are acting like these chemicals are, because they are affected. They're showing the stress responses on a cellular level. And then the freaking sperm motility is going down, testosterone activity, potential links to endometriosis, like this, and breast cancer and proximation of cell phones, and all women, please take the cell phone out of your sports bra, and men, please take it out of your damn pocket. Again, proximity. And so these are the scary things. So those kind of stress responses kept showing up over and over again. And then the brain stuff as it relates to the opening of that blood-brain barrier, inflammatory responses, and then, of course, the tumor-like effects that are going on. And I really think that has more to do with the RNA and DNA signaling, because you're always in, this is the other way. So when your body is naturally in autophagy and it's getting rid of cells and cell death, that was interesting to me. Seeing the studies where naturally the body knows how to
get rid of it,
especially through especially through fasting and everything else. Actually, a tribute to do on fasting today.
Thank you. So much.
Not for you. Other than it was for you because I knew I was going to be talking to you, but I knew I needed to, and so I was like, well, I'm fasting today. So that autophagy pathway starts to get thwarted by the electromagnetic fields, And so if you have a cell that's no longer viable and dead, right? And the body is trying to get rid of it and it can't, or the pathway is changed or altered, what do you think happens? Now you're talking about terrain. Now the terrain is starting to change. And now you're starting to understand that once the terrain has changed, the landscape of how the body is dealing with something is changing. And then that opens up a whole can of worms of what terrain and germ theory is. But when you're not able to get rid of it, that's where carcinogenic activity can really take hold.
This is super interesting. You've got my fasting brain sparked now. So autophagy, and most of my listeners know, but I want to bring it to the surface, is the cell's ability to repair itself in the most basic sense. So are you saying that with EMF exposure, that is damaging the autophagy capabilities of a cell?
Yeah, that's what the research was showing.
That's amazing.
And it's like, well, what? And so what do you think's going to happen with that environment if that is not able to be done?
And so then I'm wondering is if you put yourself in a fasted state trying to stimulate autophagy, then will it reinvigorate that part of the cell? And we probably don't have any studies showing exactly that, but I don't know, maybe is there a way to bring autophagy back online, knowing that we're if I live in a city and I've got a lot of EMFs coming into my home, if autophagy is being shut down from that, can I bring it back online with things like fasting?
Yeah, I mean, you have some interesting questions and ideas in that, because on the one hand, is it an overwhelming stress response, right? Is it just that continuous exposure causing more and more stress, and so as you died? So the first thing I would say is minimize as much as possible the exposure, right? So minimize that stress, and that stress is, again, what are you doing with your phone? Where's the Wi-Fi routers? Can you get your ass outside and put your feet on the ground and get rid of some of that polarized central radiation in your body through
can you talk about that for a moment? Because I love this idea of grounding, and you and Zach did it on your show. You all went out and that was the first time I'd seen it, but I don't want to lose that thought, because that's a counterbalance to what we're talking about. Talk about why grounding works.
Yeah, well, we're living on a battery of the Earth, and the Earth is a depolarized energy field, right? And so the whole deal comes by way of this polarization. And I'll get to the Earth and grounding, but to understand polarizing and non-polarizing, life is, and what we have here in nature, it's non-polarizing. Now, there's a couple examples of that. The sun is non-polarizing, but we've all done that experiment. You take a little magnifying glass, you polarize, you bring that energy to it, and then it can burn something, and it can start a fire, it can do all that stuff. Also, an example of, let's say, an energy field. If you take a pebble and throw it in the water, non-polarizing, normal response is you see the ripple effect, right? That's non-polarizing waves because it's not polarized. If you threw a pebble or a rock in the water and then it was polarized, it would mean that all of the energy that you threw in the water would then be polarized into one place, and then it could shoot out and essentially be it could target something. If that makes sense. So that's the demonstration of non-polarizing radiation. When we have polarizing radiation, this buildup of stress response in the body, a simple remedy of dumping the pollution of that, the body is trying to balance itself and within the field. It's always doing that. We're feeling and sensing our entire life. And so now we've created fields that are polarizing. So my bodies are feeling and sensing all of this manufactured fields, which is then what we're seeing is the stress. If I go outside and I put my feet on the ground, you now create that conduction. You're not separated from this magnetic field, this frequency of the earth, and it has the ability to pull those frequencies and create a circuit that allows for that your body to be balanced again.
So if I'm out, just like, let's say I get on a plane, because I think the way I've used it is in jet lag. I get on a plane, I'm pretty much in a tube that's got Wi-Fi coming into it and all other problems. I get to a new time zone. All that energy is creating chaos within my cells. And when I put my feet on the ground, it gives a direction for that energy to go back into the earth. Is that correct? Okay.
Bingo. So it's as basic as every home that we're all sitting in has a copper wire driven into the ground, and the electrical panel of that house and that building is wrapped around that copper and driven into the ground, because we were killing people when we were not grounding homes in the electrification we're putting in buildings, because it would not have the polarizing arcs, would not have a place to go. And then as soon as you would be in touch, it's arcing on you, and that's where it creates danger, right? So the same thing that we're doing, literally demonstrating in construction of every home on the planet, we're literally needing to do that ourselves and to ground ourselves. And our biological, I think, aside from the microbiome and the very little still that we know, I think we barely understand the radionics of our systems. We have no idea, which makes it a more important thing that we actually regulate this and prove things safe before we sell people other cell phones and everything else. It's the most insane thing ever. Okay, so first off, you don't understand electromagnetics. You don't understand how DNA and RNA are even, and biophotonics of how the microbiome is even communicating. It's even faster than what they believe the cells are communicating. So how the hell do we even understand that? And then we're just blasting ourselves with, it's fine. It's more electromagnetic fields. And so we do this stuff as humans, and then we don't prove its safety, and then we'll change it if we find it as not safe. Maybe
a couple of things I just want to make sure that people followed is, one, what I love what you said is, let's just keep these devices away from our head, away from our body. Second is, we can go out and ground, and we can do that on a I would think you probably multiple times a day would be good to get outside and put your feet on. And the third, what I think would be helpful for people now that they kind of understand this, would be, what symptoms do we know that are contributed to by EMFs? Do we have any known scientific symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, this is tricky because it's not acute, right? You didn't get in a car accident and break your leg, right? The car accident broke my leg. That's the cause, right? So from my father suffering in the 90s from multiple chemical sensitivities to electrosensitivity, which is now being recognized by the WHO, which WHO,
we got right now.
Whatever, right? But so there is some growing need to acknowledge these things. So the importance is that
the symptoms, I want people to understand, because where my heart gets really heavy and sad is when you don't understand that you have chronic fatigue or something like that, and it's coming from your router. I want people to help them make that connection.
Yeah. So the brain fog was one of the first things my father talked about, the fatigue, the depression, and the fibromyalgia. This kind of, it's almost like these symptoms are like when the cup spilleth over, it kind of goes into all of these areas. I have no energy. I I can't think. And imagine when you're in these places, how are you supposed to make better food choices? How can you motivate to exercise? How do you not argue with your family members? Like it becomes a self-fulfilling kind of scenario. So, but some of those first things, just try this out. Like turn off that Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I was thinking that if you're struggling to sleep,
and
try one night or 2 nights of just turning off your router and see what that is.
And if people start to pinpoint that they are, regardless of you're sensitive, we are all being affected by electromagnetic fields, period. And so there's Faraday tents you can put over your bed. So if you're in an apartment and you can't turn off everyone's Wi-Fi router and there's 20 that comes up, then you can sleep within a Faraday cage that doesn't allow for some of that polarized radiation to come, and you might sleep like a baby. So again, like this is foundational stuff. So if these stress responses are showing and then you can't foundationally sleep, your cascade of events is going to hockey stick, right? And then, of course, you'll wake up with no energy. You'll drink coffee more than water. And then
then it keeps
it's
going.
filtered water.
Right.
And not
Well, you know what? The best way I think to think about this is think about it like a toxic bucket. And your body is accumulating toxins, and then all of a sudden one day those toxins hit the top of the bucket and the whole bucket spills over. And you were great one day, and the next day you have one autoimmune condition, and then a year later you have another, and then another, and another. This is where, and why I wanted to keep you on this EMF, because I think this is the one that's not talked about enough, is that there are so very simple things we can do around EMF. And if you remove that one, now all the other toxins may not be flaring up for you. And so I loved what you were saying about EMF.
Totally.
Do you feel like there's another category of toxin that would be a big insult? I mean, endocrine disruptors have to be a part of that. But that's a whole... You need a graduate degree in biochemistry to understand that one.
Yeah, it is so complex. But yeah, because of EMFs, they're demonstrating similar patterns. And then when you flip over to the thing that scares me a lot is these forever chemicals, the PFASs and the PFOAs. And there's identified 9,000 different derivatives of that. And that comes from, which you also say on your website, like, hey, change out your pans, don't use Teflon. Like, but that's the Godfather, right? So that discovery of Teflon is from these fluorine gases, these PFAS and PFOAs. So what was it? It was a hell of a convenience. It was heat resistant. It was slippery.
It is a convenience.
It didn't break down.
Yes. And you didn't have to use butter, which you should probably use anyways.
Right. Right. So you throw on any and it slips right off. Yeah. Oh my God, this is the best. No one thought that there was these chemicals coming off of it. Now, it could not. Now maybe most people, especially your listeners, have gotten rid of their pans. But here's the crazy thing. It's in fire retardants. It's in the wrinkle-free, your furniture, your carpets. Whenever the furniture or the carpets or mattresses or linens, when they say, hey, this is stain resistant, this is wrinkle-free t-shirt, this is waterproofing, these are alarm bells for PFAS and forever chemicals. And just to make a stamp on forever chemicals, this is a very dangerous category, because not only is it an endocrine disruptor, it's probable and keeps going up the ladder and likely carcinogen. It's connected to testicular cancer, kidney cancer, cholesterol, diabetes. And we've played, just one more thing, we've played with these forever chemicals before. Again, we've blasted it into our world, and then we find out later, shit, that was a bad idea. Right. So things like DDT.
Right. That's a perfect example.
They threw DDT. Right. And it's in most of people's blood today. Like, and that's where the persistence just because we changed it doesn't mean that it's changed the environment yet, because it's bioaccumulating in our environment.
This is why as you're talking, I like every cell in my body is getting angry. And I realized that this is why I fell in love with fasting, because it was so overwhelming that I was like, the only way out is for us to learn a way that doesn't cost money and doesn't take time to get rid of the cells that are damaged by all these toxins. So in your book, I assume you've got mapped this out really nicely so people can chunk it down. Do you give an action plan too, as like how you can like start to unwind this so that we can start to have hope again?
Yeah, I mean, the whole last third of the book is all solutions for this stuff. I mean, it was kind of at a point where I was finishing. The way I thought about it was from inside out is a way to start. So when we open our mouth, you should really start there with the altering of your chemical exposure. And that can come, obviously, tap water, obviously processed food. Hell, there was a new study, a researcher out of, I think, UCLA, who was showing
they say it's only a question of how much you have in you plastics wise. It's not if anymore. So
right. Totally. And so that food, and then that food wrapped in whatever it's wrapped in, single-use plastics, wrapping your food, hot things, obviously single-use plastic, and water bottles, things like this. So like filter your water, remineralize it. You can use things as far as Shilajit as well, but also unrefined salt, add to your water. We're saltwater beings. We need those electrolytes. Those are easy ways. Get a glass bottle. Now you've just eliminated environmental pollutions as well as pollutions to you, and you've got clean water. Those are easy things. And then, we step out from there, and what's the skin being exposed to? And then your second skin, which is your home. What is that? What are those next steps? And then again, you're reclaiming sovereignty.
That's what I hear. I really feel like a book like this is so necessary. Thank you for writing it, because I can't even imagine as an author, like the pain of writing that had to be immense. So I'm glad you wrote it, not me. Appreciate you on that one. So, but also I think what I want everybody to take away from is, Darin and I could sit probably and talk about how horrific this is for hours. But the important thing is that we just start to become aware and just take small steps like you're talking about.
100% that. Yeah. So that's where the power is. That's the eternal optimist, which I actually am. I have more faith
I do too.
In us, you and I, and the people listening, because we have agency. We always have change, and we have the spirit that lives within us. And we can express that however we need to. And when we realize something is against that spirit of living, then we go, nope, I'm not purchasing that anymore. I'm purchasing this. And again, we have the numbers on our side because
I love
we have
that.
8
Where do
billion
people
of
find
us.
you, Darin? And how they get the book?
Yeah, so DarinOlien.com, anywhere where you love to buy books. I should be there, even on Audible, and
love it.
all social.
Well, appreciate you. We need to collaborate more, because those of us that are on the front lines trying to educate people, it gets brutal out there. And I appreciate you as a fellow warrior, and let's just keep shouting, and eventually, hopefully, people will wake up. So appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Let's do it. Grateful. Thank you.